agenda tonight, Chief Minister Alfred Cannan talks about the new direction of his government, how he'll lead the Isle of Man and help deliver high-quality, essential services that meet the needs of our people. He also told me about the challenges he faced in picking his Council of Ministers team, and that we should expect his government to have a much greater connection to public opinion. But for now, sit back and be inspired by the Isle of Man's new political action man.
Well, it's a privilege to hold the position, Phil, and I'm obviously pleased to be working with a refreshed set of colleagues in the House of Keys now, and looking forward to a bright future over the next 5 years, which I think are incredibly important to lay the foundations for this island, going forward well into the future. And we're now working hard together in terms of looking at the immediacy of the problems that we're facing, but also shaping an island plan, which I hope will be debated in its a draft format in November, and bringing that to its conclusion, its completeness in January, and really getting the government away on its five-year plan. But also, as I said, setting a framework long into the future as well.
Obviously, you have to start with a plan. In relation to the plan, how are you devising this plan? I mean, is this an Alf Cannan master plan? Is it a Council of Ministers plan, or Tynwald, do they have involvement in this too?
The day after the Chief Minister election, I met privately with Tynwald members, and we actually set to work that day. Had a good couple of hours together, whereby effectively I undertook a consultation with them on their views about what they had found on the doorstep, drew out of them some of their key priorities, where they felt what the island should look like going forward. It was a really useful session. As a result of that consultation, we're working hard now to draw out the key themes. We will not only bring this back to Tynwald as an open draft document, but also use that as effectively as a method to communicate with the public in terms of what the government is planning for the next 5 years, and in between that space of Tynwald debate in November, some public communication as well around what the plan is. We will draw that back in then and bring forward a finalised document. But as you say, I mean, you've absolutely got to have a plan. You want to have a vision. You want to have the key policy priorities brought forward. You want to give the steer in the direction. But as you will know, as I will know, as anybody who's had some years of experience with these things, plans don't always, as they say, survive the first contact with the enemy, so to speak, and there's always going to be pressures, and there's always going to be difficulties, but you'd still, nevertheless, I hope that this time we will have a robust plan that really does determine to deliver for people on the island. And that's the critical point, Phil. You can write a lot, and you can get carried away also with scoping out a shape for the island in the future, but actually it doesn't really impact on the ground in people's lives. And I want to make sure that what you're doing is relevant and really does start to make a difference to the challenges that people are finding, and our constituents and our nation is finding in its day-to-day life.
Because, of course, this certainly has been seen as part of the problem of the past administration. The past administration, and indeed, I suppose, all governments over the years. The longer you get involved in an area, in a department, certainly I found this when I was in DOI, you tend to start to understand the world through the eyes of your department rather than through the eyes of the public. And I think COVID is probably a really good example of this. We've got lots of people on the Isle of Man who remain quite anxious about the whole COVID thing. I've heard you recently saying that, so long as we're okay in terms of the health service, then that's the only mitigation we need to put in place. And I kind of get that from a government perspective, but from the public's perspective, there are still quite a lot of people on the island who are anxious about going out, anxious about going to venues. Charities are struggling because people aren't coming to their fundraisers, this and that. Is there a bit more that you need to do in terms of addressing COVID than just think about how it's going to impact on government services?
Well, I think the point that you were initially starting off with in terms of, government getting detached from public views and public opinion is actually, I think, that the critical point. And this is where, we need to make sure that we are continuing to be extremely aware of what is actually being delivered for the public, first of all. I think what we've seen is perhaps we get carried away with projects and plans that seem to look great on paper, big active travel plans, for example. But, when you're not cutting the grass back, when people are finding that their potholes in their streets or roads are just not getting any attention or not being looked after quickly enough, and we're finding main critical arterial routes are very under repaired, if you like, or damaging to vehicles, and there's just no sign or no strategy in place or no indication as to when they're going to get repaired, then you're going to find a huge sense of frustration. And this is what I'm really keen to get from our island plan, as well as the holistic vision for the island, as well as pushing forward with optimism. I want to make sure that we have got our priorities right in terms of our delivery, and that those priorities are in line with what we've just been told on the doorstep over 6 weeks of active campaigning, because it's also very easy to hear everybody's voices, to reflect that during election campaigns, and then to find actually you've gone in, you've shut the door, and you've got carried away with government and government departments, and you've completely lost sight of what you were told by the public. And we don't want to be a cyclical 5 years where we come back and find we've got exactly the same problems, and the public are just looking at you and talking to you and say, well, nothing's changed, despite the fact that we told you where we felt the key priorities were. And COVID obviously is you're a slightly different matter, but broadly that was the point you were making at the beginning. Yeah. And absolutely, this is where the plan and delivery, and that's why we're going to shape in the centre a much more engaged structure, both around the policy and island policy, and also delivery. And ministers and council ministers will be committed as part of that island plan to ensuring that our policy formation and our delivery attaches and aligns itself to what Tynwald will ultimately endorse when accepting the island plan as the key document and the key framework to move forward.
You're listening to Chief Minister Alf Cannan. Thinking then about the team, and indeed your style of leadership, because these things are really quite crucial and important. The one thing I somewhat mischievously commented on a few weeks back was, for the first time in the history of ministerial government, we don't have a minister from the south of the island. Does that mean we've got a better chance of getting Castle Rushen High School built?
Putting together the team is obviously very important, and you're making decisions and judgments about how to do it. There's various different ways to do that in itself. You can just simply see one person at a time and put them in a darkened room and ask them if they want to be a minister and where they want to go, etc. Or you can try and do that a little bit more with a broader engagement, and be quite open about what you're actually thinking, and that's the way I chose to do it. I'm not saying it's the right way or the wrong way, but as a result of that, you look to try and get the right blend of people together. I think when you're looking, I'm old enough and big enough and had enough experience to know in our political system, you have to listen to different voices in order to ensure that I think you are properly finding the solutions for the broader spectrum of the community, or at least having that input. But you're also looking for people who are you feel share similar goals and objectives. And a couple of people have said to me, well, why have you brought in say Alex Allinson or Laurie Hooper when they've voted against you and haven't necessarily openly stated that they've shared your vision? yes, that's true, but there's also a lot of common ground. So for example, with Alex Allinson and I, there were some quite similar elements, within our manifestos, and I think we both wanted more transparency around government, and we both wanted, we both want the island to succeed, albeit he had a bigger emphasis in some areas, and I had a different emphasis in others. But nevertheless, it doesn't mean to say that I don't respect the fact that Alex Allinson or Laurie Hooper or whoever it is, they don't have a valid point. I think the critical test comes as you start to work together and try and push forward, and then as government policy develops, both with an island plan, but also as it meets its challenges, then I think that's when, as a leader, as the Chief Minister, you're then making further judgments about the shape of the Council of Ministers, and that's why I was also quite careful to say I wouldn't be against reshuffling if needed, but then I wasn't going to necessarily make a firm statement that there was going to be a reshuffle at a certain point. And but also around that, I accept there were disappointed MHKs, who felt that they could have been in that council. I hope that their careers develop successfully. Most of those MHKs have gone on to take other roles now, and we'll push this along. The critical point is, in amongst the sort of jostling, if you like, for positions, etc., that we all commit to getting the best we can, both in terms of government service delivery for the island, but making sure the island is well positioned as it moves forward in quite challenging times to meet really the changes that we're likely to see in the next 10 and 15 years.
And in terms of that team, I mean, I think it's always been the case, hasn't it, that Council of Ministers has generally been as inclusive as possible because of the nature of how the House of Keys elected, Chief Ministers elected, how the government is then formed. There isn't the direct democratic mandate that perhaps some people quite a few people have called through for over the years. And indeed, I think yourself, in the run-up to the Chief Minister election, you'd suggested that perhaps it would be better to have some kind of public involvement in that process. So ultimately, there's a slight democratic deficit there, but it's one that I presume you feel confident that in 5 years' time you'll be able to say to the public, actually, this is what we were being told you wanted on the doorsteps, and this is what we've delivered. So you feel that you can be held accountable for what you're doing.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, the public are very good at making that judgment, Phil, as you know. Very rarely do the public get matters wrong at all, and very perceptive in terms of what has been achieved. I think there's still, and I'm sure that there is still improvements we can make in terms of our democracy, the way it functions. And, no democracy is perfect, and I think there will possibly be reflection on the way that the Chief Minister election has been conducted in this day and age of social media, but also the need in some respects for media who want to engage, and television interviews, radio debates, Chief Minister hustings. You do get to a point where you say, well, what is the point if the public actually don't have an input into that themselves? And that will be I'm sure for discussion, and some members of Tynwald may or may not want to pick that up. But for me now, the judgment will be around the island plan, the formation of that. I'm hoping that there will be some public discussion around that, and indeed input. It's not going to be set absolutely in stone in that it can be improved as we go along, and that will prove the platform, I think, at the end of the 5-year period to say that's what we started off with, that's what you wanted, and we now need to see where the government's at the end of the 5-year point.
And one of the things that you learn very quickly when you get into roles of responsibility, I mean, you've had this now for 5 years in Treasury. Obviously, you've had it in your career before you got into politics as well. But there are very few decisions which leave everybody happy at the end. one of the more recent decisions, of course, has been the carving up of the departments and which members go where. We've got 5 MHKs who aren't in departments. The Speaker, of course, who can't be. You've got Daphne Kane and Chris Thomas, who have been made chairs of 2 new boards, or 1 new board and 1 to be revamped board. You've also got Stu Peters, who said he wasn't wanting to be in government initially. But then Jason Moorhouse, who appears to have wanted to be in but didn't find a seat when the music stopped.
Well, yeah, I mean, everybody's had an opportunity to talk to me about what they're looking for. I'm really pleased that there has been a significant number of MHKs, and indeed MLCs willing to put their hands up and want to work and help support the actual delivery of government. And then there's been a number within that who've said, well, I can only do certain things because I'd like to sit on social affairs, or I'd like to sit on the economic scrutiny committee. And so, and as things have shaped at the moment, in Jason's case, I think he's really keen to apply himself to economic scrutiny, which is great. I'm hoping that he will find over the next few weeks that there may well be something else that he feels that he can do within government, and of course, we can work with ministers as well to help shape that. So we do have some fluidity and flexibility, but by the same token, we'll have to work with the ministers as well to make sure their departments are properly and adequately supported. And also, it's not jobs for jobs. We actually need to have some productivity here as well. And listen, Jason Moorhouse has been fantastic with me in terms of helping shape the manifesto. He's played a lead role in that, and you can see he's straight in again as a constituency MHK leading the charge with questions. And I have no doubt at some point in this 5 years he's going to play a leading role in helping shape policy or delivery for this island.
You're listening to Chief Minister Alf Cannan. Because, of course, one of the things we were discussing before the chief ministerial election was actually maybe government had shot itself in the foot in terms of the changes that had been made, which made it less attractive for members to want to be part of government. And actually, the conclusion of this recent round of ministerial and membership appointments would indicate that, in fact, that's far from the case.
Well, yes, but I mean, also, I've been very clear. I don't have this sort of Team Tynwald view or perspective. I think without some challenge and positive debate and possibly some friction, I don't think necessarily you're going to get progression. So it's absolutely important you get that, but it's the way that's delivered is important. And I've told everybody this is just about everybody cozying up. This is about getting delivery, and we need the challenge, and I'd like to see that from the scrutiny bodies, and I'd like to see that from members of Tynwald. But the critical element, as you will know from your time, there's a substantial difference between negative criticism and positive criticism. And positive criticism is clearly identifying where things are going wrong, but also, where possible, trying to bring forward some views around what might be the solution and where alternatives may lie if individuals are feeling that government are on the wrong track, and also trying to stick to the policy and not the individuals, and that way you can get really positive, healthy debate, and that's what I'm really looking to see, and I'd want to see that debate happening. But we also, government has to make decisions, and we have to progress, because we don't want to procrastinate. The other danger about listening to too many voices all the time is that actually you just don't get anywhere. So at some point, and I guess this is where the leadership element is, you've got to draw a line and say we're pushing onwards, because we've got a belief that this is the right way forward, even though there's clearly a lot of voices potentially saying that they don't agree. And this is part of perhaps the tougher side of politics in terms of taking the island forward to the right place that it needs to be in the future. So, and I think people will find, of course, we've had COVID, of course, as an island. We're coming out of that. We've got inflation issues now, heading up towards 5%. We've got all these issues that are coming forward, and of course, that's going to impact in a number of areas, including budget. So, this, the sort of honeymoon period, if you like, and I know the new MHKs in particular are still sort of thinking, when's the real work going to start? I mean, the work is building, but you will find very quickly, I think by the time we get to November, Tynwald, they will feel that actually we are now properly engaged, teeth fully into the into the action, and there's going to be a huge amount that we need to get right in challenging circumstances.
And that talk and the eagerness and enthusiasm is all well and good. But we do seem to have a structure across the whole of government, which is how can we say no to this brilliant idea? How can we put this idea off? Because actually, sort of paraphrasing the thoughts of many civil servants, we are massively overworked. We don't have sufficient levels of funding to do the day job, and actually, this bright idea that's just been thrust in our direction. It is just a whole load of additional extra work which we're going to struggle to deliver. So how do we change that? How do we overcome? Because again, you talk to anyone in the private sector, and they will say government, far from being an active friend and supporter, is often it's often best to try and avoid government altogether because it's so hard to understand how to break through the barriers to actually get the support you need. How are you going to change that?
Well, I think first of all, we do need a strong island plan, because that will provide the framework and the basis of government's priorities. And we can't be all things to all people. And I think that government therefore needs to be clear what it is intending to deliver in terms of its top level, if you like, and in terms of its absolute basics, its core basics, and we must get that right, whether it's healthcare delivery, education delivery, infrastructure delivery. The second point is that we must, part of the challenge, and one thing we're looking to seriously overcome, is this continued element of this silo. That's a matter for the Department of Infrastructure, because there's so much cross-government impact to delivery and policy making, and so that's why we're very keen now to ensure that when we get the island plan together, the structure around that in terms of the policy making, the policy delivery is clearly defined, and also that there is there will be a central policy team and a central delivery board in the centre, who will make sure that we are delivering where we say that we need to deliver. And we can also expand that to other bodies, which we will lay out. I don't want to preempt where those will be, but when I'm talking to Tynwald next week, when we talk to the island plan in the Tynwald debate in November, we want to be making sure that we have got that cross-government functionality. And the third issue is absolutely we need to have a can-do attitude in government, particularly for private enterprise and business, not a can't do. And I think that springs to this point where people come to government with opportunities or ideas, and they often get sorry, can't do that. What we actually need is, if we can't do it, well, how can we help? Okay, there may be rules, there may be regulations, whatever it is in the way, but we need to try and help people achieve whatever it is that they've got in mind, and we need to try and make sure that we are trying to overcome or give them other opportunities or places to go to try and allow them to succeed with whatever they're doing. So culturally, absolutely, we need to get away from can't do to we can do, and we're going to try and help facilitate people to achieve.
One of the things that you've been very clear about is that you think the DOI fundamentally isn't working the way it's currently structured. You've talked about, you've agreed to establish a Housing and Communities Board, which is going to take away certain responsibilities. You seem to be suggesting that the DOI is not fit for purpose. How are you going to change that? Have you got a clear or fixed view on this at the moment?
Yeah, there is clearly a number of issues. I think when you look at the challenges, and we all know what they are, Phil, when you've got the delivery issues and problems coming through regular over expenditure, projects that just appear not to have been properly tested at the planning stage. That first and foremost, you've got to challenge and say, well, is the department actually fit for purpose? It clearly isn't. The other element is that it's actually very difficult to understand how everything is fitting together within the department and get enough transparency over, say, the costs and the way that services in certain areas are being delivered. And we need to bring out more we need to bring more transparency to those areas. So I think, again, when I'm talking to Tynwald in the next few weeks, I think, there is a common view that the DOI needs to be reformed. And then the new minister has just gone in. He's currently trying to shape one or two things, but form his own views as well. In the next few weeks, we will bring that together. But essentially, as you say, first step, housing, which has been put in the Department of Infrastructure. I don't think that's been a great place for housing. Also, it hasn't perhaps delivered at all in terms of its priorities within government, and I'm not sure it's actually clear which direction we're going. So that's going to come out and sit now with a new housing and communities board. So we'll bring local government with that, and then we will be looking, I think, at the various the heritage railways, for example, trying to bring more transparency to what's going on there. We need to get definitely more transparency and approach in proper policy alignment as well with public transport, and that's not only for the here and now, but we'll also need to understand where they think they're going and how they're going to take that further forward in the future. And also then, when it comes to our projects, we need to be more confident that the right level of expertise is in place. So we will be looking at what type of board level structure we now need around the minister, whether that's a major projects unit sitting outside of the DOI or whether that board effectively is strengthened at the DOI level. I mean, with people with serious and significant experience in major infrastructure design and delivery, so that we can be reassured from a political basis that what we are being told about our major projects carries with it a quality assurance stamp, if you like.
Back in 2008, when we had the VAT renegotiation and significant reduction in expenditure for government, we significantly cut the Department of Infrastructure's budget. It was very clearly sort of marked that if this is something that could continue for a short period of time, maybe 2 or 3 years. Beyond that, the wheels would start to come off and it would become obvious that we weren't investing enough in terms of our infrastructure. So whilst I don't disagree with anything that you've said, that there is that other element to this. Ultimately, if you want to get the experience that you need in the department, it's going to have to be funded somehow, isn't it?
Well, things have to be both properly funded, but also have to be correctly prioritised, and we also have to ensure that where we are spending money, we're getting value for money, and we can see that publicly. I think this is the big issue: is we haven't got that transparency at the moment. It's all one big budget, and we need and things have been brought together. And I don't know, 10 years ago, it was almost merge things together and have get rid of the individual bodies and put them all into one. But big is best. But actually, when you start analysing and looking at the different parts of that and how it's all brought together, very often, when you're coming through one single minister responsible for multiple points of delivery of service delivery and often areas which require engineering expertise and financial accountability as well, it becomes very blurred in terms of its department, and both in terms of what its vision is and what it's delivering. So we do need to bring more identity to the different parts of the department. We need more transparency about the expenditure, and vis-a-vis then we need to work out the priorities, Phil. And I think that this again goes back to having the right priorities within the island plan, because there are going to be spending pressures now on government. It's not always just about cuts, it's about value for money. It's also about economic growth and getting the blend right. I mean, and within that, it's I think those austerity years were very, very tough. I don't think austerity is the right message. At the end of that period, there were significant hardships and splits in society, and I think that we can do better. And over the last 5 years, particularly in the Treasury Minister, as the Treasury Minister, I think we've begun to understand more about putting the different parts together, and what we need to do to succeed. But fundamentally, yes, you're right. There's only so much money to go round. And therefore, you do need to make some tougher decisions sometimes about what government is actually doing.
That was Chief Minister Alf Cannan. Plenty of challenges ahead, but with a bold new plan coming soon, an enthusiastic Council of Ministers and a fresh and eager Tynwald, should we expect a bright and successful 5 years to come? Certainly worth giving them the benefit of the doubt. I hope you feel better informed after tonight's agenda, and please get in touch with any comments you've got on what you've heard. It's hard to beat having the Chief Minister on the show, but I suspect next week's show will be equally inspiring. But for now, I'm Phil Gaughan. Guramayu. Thanks for listening.